Sandile Shezi had always been a man in control. Whether he was selling dreams of financial freedom or standing before a room full of eager investors, he exuded confidence, untouchable, untamed, unstoppable. But on one fateful day in October 2021, reality came crashing down. That day, Gauteng police approached him, placed him under arrest, and took him into custody. It wasn't the first time he'd faced legal trouble, so he remained unfazed. To him, this was just another hurdle, one he could talk his way out of like he always had. But what he didn't realize was that this time was different. This was not just another accusation. This was the beginning of the end. In the months that followed, the walls of his empire, built on deception and empty promises, began to crumble. The man who once sold the illusion of untouchable success was about to face a reckoning he never saw coming. This is the story of Sandile Shezi. Born in 1991, Shezi grew up in the township of Umlazi, a place where survival meant more than just getting by. It meant hustling. Life in Umlazi wasn't easy. Opportunities were few, and success stories were even fewer. But Shezi had something that set him apart, an unshakable belief that he was destined for more. From an early age, he watched his parents struggle to make ends meet. His father was a school principal, and while that provided some stability, it was clear that a steady paycheck wasn't always enough. Money was tight, and dreams had limits. But Shezi wasn't one to sit back and accept the cards he was dealt. He had an instinct for making things happen, even when the odds were stacked against him. As a child, he was always looking for ways to make money. While other kids played soccer in the streets, Shezi was thinking about business. He started small, very small. His first venture was selling muffins to his classmates. Every morning, while most kids were still waking up, Shezi was already planning how to turn a profit. He'd wake up early, collect the muffins, and head to school with a backpack that wasn't filled with books, but with potential income. At first, it was a simple idea: buy low, sell high. He convinced his parents to give him a small amount of money to buy ingredients. Then, he'd either bake the muffins himself or get them from a local bakery at a discounted price. During school breaks, while others ran off to play, he walked around the playground, selling his muffins to hungry classmates. And he wasn't just selling, he was marketing. He'd hype up his products, telling students why his muffins were fresher, tastier, and worth their lunch money. If someone hesitated, he'd throw in a special deal: buy 2 today and get a discount tomorrow. He understood demand and supply before he even knew what those words meant. It wasn't long before muffins weren't enough. Shezi wanted more. He expanded his little empire, moving into secondhand clothes. He realized that people in his township didn't always have the money for brand new outfits, but they still wanted to look good. So he found a solution. He'd source clothes from local thrift markets, clean them up, and resell them at a markup. If a shirt had a small tear, he'd stitch it up. If shoes were dirty, he'd polish them until they looked new. He knew how to make something appear more valuable than it actually was, a skill that would later define his entire career. His talent for persuasion became his greatest weapon. He could make someone believe they needed something, even if they didn't. He could sell anything, and more importantly, he could sell himself. By the time Shezi was in high school, he wasn't just another student. He was a businessman in the making. Teachers noticed his hustle. Some praised his drive, while others saw him as too ambitious for his own good. He wasn't interested in waiting for life to hand him success. He was going to take it. When he got to university, his reputation for making money was already well established. Selling muffins and secondhand clothes had been his first taste of financial independence, but he was hungry for more. Small wins weren't enough. He wanted something bigger, something that would set him apart. In 2011, at just 18 years old, Shezi enrolled at the Durban University of Technology, but not because he was chasing a degree. For him, university wasn't the destination. It was just another stop on the road to wealth. While his classmates sat through lectures and mapped out steady, respectable careers, Shezi's mind was elsewhere. He had come across something that promised riches without the long grind of a traditional job. It was fast, thrilling, and seemingly limitless in potential: Forex trading. Foreign exchange trading was nothing new, but to a young man hungry for success, it felt like a golden ticket. The idea was simple: buy and sell currencies at the right time, and with the right strategy, the profits could be limitless. Unlike his muffin business, where he had to wake up early and hustle in the streets, Forex allowed him to make money with a few clicks on a computer screen. It was money without labor, wealth without waiting. But there was a problem. Forex trading required capital, and Shezi didn't have the kind of money needed to make real gains. He could have started small, like many traders do, testing the waters with whatever little he could afford. But patience was not in his nature. He wanted to go all in, to make big money fast. and that's when he made the decision that would change his life forever. Instead of using his university tuition fees for what they were intended, his education, Shezi saw them as an investment fund. Without hesitation, he took the money meant for his studies and poured it into the Forex market. It was a reckless, high-risk gamble, but Shezi believed in one thing above all else: himself. For most people, a move like this would have ended in disaster. The Forex market is unforgiving, and many beginners lose everything in their first few trades. But Shezi was lucky, or at least that's what it looked like. His initial trades turned a profit, and the numbers in his account began to climb. Whether it was skill, sheer luck, or a combination of both, Shezi had made the kind of money most university students could only dream of, and once he got a taste of that success, there was no going back. By the time he was 23, Shezi was no longer just a university student. He was a self-proclaimed millionaire. The boy from Umlazi, who once sold muffins in the schoolyard, was now driving luxury cars, wearing designer suits, and living the high life. He had built an image, one of wealth, power, and financial genius, and people were watching. Shezi understood something crucial about success. It wasn't enough to just make money. To truly cement his place at the top, he needed to build an empire. That's when he joined forces with George van der Riet, an experienced Forex trader who had spent years navigating the unpredictable world of currency trading. Together, they launched what would become one of the most talked about Forex training institutions in South Africa, the Global Forex Institute. On the surface, the mission sounded noble. The institute promised to teach ordinary South Africans how to escape poverty through Forex trading. Shezi and van der Riet marketed their program as a solution to unemployment, a pathway to wealth that required no degree, no business connections, just the right mindset and a willingness to learn. It was a message that resonated with thousands of young South Africans desperate for financial freedom. Shezi presented himself as living proof that it was possible. He was the boy from the township who had cracked the code to wealth, and now he was willing to share the secret. The Global Forex Institute offered free introductory classes, drawing in crowds who were eager to learn how to trade like Shezi. But while the first lessons were free, the real knowledge, the strategies that supposedly led to success, came with a price. Students were encouraged to pay for advanced training, premium courses, and mentorship programs. And they did. They poured their savings into the institute, believing that if Shezi could do it, so could they. But what many failed to realize was that Forex trading is not a guaranteed path to riches. For every person who wins, there are countless others who lose. Yet, Shezi kept the dream alive. His social media was flooded with images of his luxury lifestyle, sports cars, private jets, high-end fashion. He made success look effortless, and people wanted in. But behind the scenes, cracks were beginning to form. Despite following his teachings, many of Shezi's students struggled to make money in Forex trading. Some lost everything, and when they started asking questions, the answers weren't always clear. The truth was, not everyone could win. And for those who lost, Shezi's promise of financial freedom began to look more like an illusion. But by the time the doubts started to spread, Shezi had already built his empire. His name was everywhere. He was celebrated as a genius, a pioneer, a self-made millionaire who had beaten the system. What few realized was that the real game had only just begun. Because when you build an empire on a foundation of illusions, it's only a matter of time before the cracks turn into collapse. At this point in time, Shezi wasn't just a trader anymore. He was a brand. His name carried weight, his face was recognizable, and his story had become legendary. He had transformed himself from an ambitious township kid into a figure of inspiration, someone young South Africans could look up to. But wealth alone wasn't enough. Shezi understood that true power came from influence, and influence required something more than just flashy cars and expensive suits. It needed a cause, a purpose, something that made him more than just a businessman. That's when the Sandile Shezi Foundation was born. At first glance, the foundation seemed like the next logical step in his journey. It was positioned as a philanthropic effort, a way for Shezi to give back to the very communities he claimed to have risen from. According to its mission, the foundation focused on education, health, and wealth creation, aiming to uplift and transform young lives across Africa. On paper, it was noble. The foundation promised to provide scholarships, mentorship, and financial literacy programs to disadvantaged youth. It aimed to bridge the gap between poverty and opportunity, giving young South Africans the tools they needed to succeed in a rapidly evolving world. Shezi spoke passionately about the foundation, often positioning himself as a man on a mission. He wasn't just about making money, he was about making a difference, and for a while, many believed him. The foundation became another tool in Shezi's arsenal, reinforcing his image as a self-made millionaire who genuinely cared about the people. It added credibility to his name, making him appear more than just a businessman. He was now a philanthropist, a mentor, and a leader. Whenever criticism of his Forex training program surfaced, the foundation was used as evidence of his goodwill. If he were truly a fraud, why would he invest in charitable causes? If he were only in it for himself, why would he bother giving back? The foundation shielded him from deeper scrutiny, making it difficult for skeptics to question his intentions. Shezi made sure the foundation was highly visible. He attended charity events, posed for photos with children, and gave motivational speeches about the power of financial freedom. News outlets covered his initiatives, painting him as a role model for the next generation. But behind the scenes, things weren't as they seemed. While the foundation made bold promises, the actual impact remained questionable. Beneficiaries who were supposed to receive funding and mentorship found themselves caught in an endless cycle of unfulfilled pledges. Scholarships were announced but never awarded. Promises of financial aid vanished into thin air. Yet, Shezi continued to market the foundation aggressively, using it to gain more trust, more followers, and, most importantly, more investors. It became a branding tool, a way to attract even more people to his Forex training programs. If people believed he was giving back, they were more likely to buy into his vision. And they did. More young South Africans poured their savings into his programs, convinced they were learning from a man who truly wanted to uplift the youth. But what they didn't realize was that the foundation, much like his Forex empire, was built on illusion. As complaints about his business practices started piling up, authorities and financial watchdogs began looking into his dealings. Questions arose about where the money from the foundation was actually going. Despite all the media coverage and bold claims, there was little to no evidence that the foundation had made any real difference in people's lives. By 2021, whispers of discontent had turned into loud accusations. Investors who had once trusted Shezi with their money started speaking out. Many claimed they had handed over large sums with the expectation of life-changing returns, only to be met with silence, excuses, or outright dismissal. The empire he had so carefully built was beginning to crumble, and the law was closing in. The first major blow came in 2021 when Shezi was charged with fraud. The case involved a former business partner who claimed that Shezi had deceived him out of 500,000 rands, about $27,000. This wasn't just an angry client filing a complaint. This was a legal matter that would force Shezi into the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. When news of the charges broke, it sent shockwaves through South Africa's financial circles. How could the so-called youngest millionaire be facing fraud charges? How could the same man who preached financial empowerment now stand accused of exploiting others? With his back against the wall, Shezi did what many in his position would do. He handed himself over to the authorities. But even this was a carefully calculated move. By turning himself in, he attempted to control the narrative. He wasn't running, he wasn't hiding, he was cooperating, or at least that's how he wanted the public to see it. After being processed, he was granted bail, and for a brief moment, it seemed like he had dodged a but the legal storm was far from over. Barely a year later, in 2022, Shezi found himself back in the legal spotlight. This time, he was hauled before the Wynberg Magistrates Court over another fraud case involving 200,000 rands, which was about $11,000. Another investor had stepped forward, claiming that Shezi had promised lucrative returns, only to leave them with empty pockets. It was the same story playing out again, a dream sold, a fortune lost, and an investor left chasing shadows. But by this point, Shezi's reputation was no longer untouchable. The mystique that once surrounded him had faded, replaced by skepticism and scrutiny. The media, once eager to celebrate his success, now reported on his legal troubles with growing interest. His name, once associated with wealth and inspiration, had become synonymous with deception. As these legal battles unfolded, more voices joined the chorus of those who had been burned by Shezi's promises. Former clients, business associates, and everyday South Africans who had invested their savings into his programs began sharing their experiences. Some had lost thousands, others had lost everything. Authorities started looking deeper into his business dealings, and what they found only raised more questions. Money had disappeared, returns had never materialized, and Shezi's business model seemed to rely more on recruitment and fees than actual trading success. Despite his attempts to brush off the accusations, the walls were closing in. The courts were now involved, and Shezi was no longer just a controversial figure. He was an accused fraudster fighting to stay out of prison. By December 2022, the walls were closing in even further. Reports surfaced that yet another warrant for Shezi's arrest had been issued, this time by the Santon police. More fraud cases had emerged, each one painting a darker picture of his dealings. The specifics of the charges were not immediately clear, but what was certain was that the authorities were no longer looking the other way. The man who had built his fortune on grand promises and the illusion of wealth was now being hunted by the very system he had once seemed untouchable within. The weight of fraud allegations had already tarnished Shezi's reputation, but the collapse of his empire was about to take an even more painful turn. In a shocking twist, his wife, Sandile Shezi, was drawn into the storm, arrested, and charged with fraud and money laundering. In November 2023, the law finally caught up with Shezi. She was arrested in 4 ways, Gauteng, by the Directorate for Priority Crime Investigation, better known as the Hawks. The charge? Her alleged involvement in an investment scheme linked to Shezi, a scheme that left an investor short by 600,000 rands, which is about $32,000. The investor had been lured in with a 100,000 rands deposit, and after seeing early dividends, was convinced to invest a further 500,000 rands. That money disappeared, just like so many others before it. Following her arrest, Shezi appeared before the Alexandra Magistrates Court, where she was granted bail set at 5,000 rands, about $300. The news of Shezi's arrest sent shockwaves through the country. While Shezi's fraudulent dealings had been exposed over time, many saw Shezi as an innocent bystander, someone who had simply been swept up in the chaos of her husband's empire. But with this arrest, the question loomed: was she a willing accomplice, or just another victim of Shezi's unchecked ambition? Shezi was quick to fight back against the allegations. In a desperate attempt to clear her name, she wrote an open letter to Shezi, pleading with him to publicly acknowledge her innocence. She insisted that her involvement in his business dealings had been purely supportive, the actions of a wife standing by her husband, unaware of the depths of his deceit. Her words were filled with anguish, revealing a woman who felt betrayed and abandoned, now forced to defend herself in a scandal she never anticipated. As the legal battles mounted, the strain on their personal relationship became undeniable. Shezi made a public declaration. She and Shezi had been separated for some time. Their once glamorous life together had unraveled, leaving them with only one connection: co-parenting their child. Shezi's arrest and subsequent separation from Shezi added another layer to the downfall of South Africa's most notorious fraudster. His once flourishing business ventures were now in ruins, his name tainted beyond repair, and his personal life in shambles. The man who had promised financial freedom to so many had lost everything, including the people closest to him. Right now, Shezi is entangled in multiple legal battles, and the odds of him walking away unscathed are slim because the evidence against him is overwhelming. For years, Shezi had sold people a dream, convincing them that financial success was just a few smart trades away. But now, the reality is impossible to ignore. The dream has collapsed, and in its place is a trail of legal battles, financial ruin, and betrayed investors. The so-called King of Bling is finally facing the consequences of his empire built on deception. And this time, there is no clever business move that can save him.